My husband replaced my $15,000 heirloom with a 3D printed fake, so I exposed him with a hologram. I was sitting in the pitch-black void of my home animation studio, the only illumination coming from a high-lumen 4K projector casting a glowing, life-sized skeletal wireframe directly onto the white drywall. I listened to the heavy deadbolt of the front door click open down the hall, my thumb hovering silently over the spacebar of my keyboard, ready to hit play on the exact digital recreation of my husband committing a felony. My name is Lilly. I am a senior 3D character artist and technical animator for a major video game studio. My entire professional existence revolves around scrutinizing the microscopic details of reality and replicating them in a digital space. I spend 60 hours a week analyzing how light bounces off different materials, how muscles twitch beneath the skin, and the exact mathematical physics of weight and gravity. I have an eye for detail that borders on the superhuman, a professional curse that makes it entirely impossible to lie to me visually. Unfortunately, my husband Derek lacked any understanding of my skill set. Derek and I had been married for 4 years. Over the last 18 months, the man I loved had slowly dissolved, replaced by a twitchy, secretive stranger entirely consumed by the toxic underworld of cryptocurrency day trading. He called it investing. I called it a gambling addiction draped in financial buzzwords. Our home had become a psychological minefield. He spent his nights locked in the guest bedroom, his face bathed in the sickly red and green glow of candlestick charts, aggressively stress-testing our finances while claiming his portfolio was just experiencing a temporary dip. The tension was a suffocating, physical weight in the house. I could hear him muttering to himself at 3 a.m., the frantic, angry clicking of his mouse echoing through the drywall. 2 months ago, my grandmother passed away. She was the matriarch of our family, a woman of sharp wit and immense grace, and in her will, she left me her most prized possession, a vintage, custom-engraved diamond necklace. It featured a flawless, 2-carat center stone set in a heavy platinum pendant, entirely surrounded by an intricate halo of smaller diamonds. It was independently appraised at $15,000, but to me, its emotional value was entirely incalculable. It smelled faintly of her rosewater perfume when I took it out of its velvet box. I kept it safely tucked away in my heavy mahogany jewelry armoire in our master bedroom, a tangible piece of my history. 2 days before the burglary, I experienced the most visceral, terrifying betrayal of my entire life. It was a Sunday afternoon. Derek was at the gym, or so he claimed. I was upstairs, organizing my closet, and I felt a sudden, profound urge to hold my grandmother's necklace. I just needed the physical comfort of it. I opened the heavy doors of the armoire, pulled out the velvet box, and unhinged the lid. I stared down at the piece of jewelry resting on the white satin lining. My breath caught sharply in my throat. My professional brain instantly screamed that something was catastrophically wrong. To a layman, it looked perfectly fine. But I am not a layman. I build photorealistic materials for a living. I understand the index of refraction, or IOR. A real diamond has an IOR of exactly 2.42. It bends light so aggressively, so sharply, that it creates an internal fire, casting microscopic prisms of color even in dim lighting. The stone sitting in my jewelry box looked completely dead. The light hitting it didn't bounce, it absorbed. It had the visual density of cheap glass, maybe an IOR of 1.5. My hands began to violently tremble. I reached out and picked it up. The weight was wrong. Platinum is an incredibly dense, heavy metal. This felt terrifyingly light. I carried it over to the large bay window, letting the harsh afternoon sunlight hit it directly. I pulled my jeweler's loupe from my desk drawer, a tool I used to examine physical textures for my rendering work, and pressed it directly against my eye, holding the necklace an inch from the glass. A cold, heavy stone dropped straight to the bottom of my stomach, leaving a freezing, hollow vacuum in my chest. There, beneath the magnificent magnification, I didn't see the microscopic, natural flaws of a vintage diamond. I saw perfectly uniform, microscopic horizontal ridges, layer lines, exactly 0.05 millimeters thick. It was resin. Someone had used a high-end, 8K resolution 3D resin printer to create a flawless, one-to-one physical replica of my grandmother's necklace. They had painted the platinum setting with a specialized, high-gloss chrome modeling paint. They had printed the diamonds using clear, UV-cured casting resin. I felt the heat rising in my neck and my vision actually went blurry with a terrifying, bloodthirsty rage. There was only one person in the world who had unrestricted access to my jewelry box, knew the exact dimensions of the necklace, and possessed the desperate, sociopathic audacity to pull this off. Derek had stolen my inheritance and replaced it with a piece of painted plastic. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him when he walked through the door smelling of cheap cologne and nervous sweat. I placed the plastic fake exactly where I found it. I knew that if I confronted him with the fake, he would gaslight me. He would claim him he didn't know what happened, or that I was crazy. I needed undeniable, absolute proof of where the real one went. I didn't have to wait long. Last Tuesday, I came home from the studio at 6 p.m. to find my front door standing wide open. The moment I stepped over the threshold, the harsh crunch of shattered glass echoed beneath my leather boots. My living room window, the massive, floor-to-ceiling pane that looked out over the backyard patio, was completely annihilated. Derek was standing in the center of the living room, clutching his phone to his ear, pacing frantically, his chest heaving in an Oscar-worthy performance of utter terror. "They took it, Lilly," he hissed, rushing toward me the second I walked in, grabbing my shoulders with trembling, sweaty hands. "I just got home. Someone broke in. They bypassed the security sensors and smashed the glass. The police are on their way." I looked past his shoulder. I looked at the shattered window. Then I looked toward my open office door. My home rendering rig, a custom-built, liquid-cooled monstrosity worth well over $10,000, was sitting completely untouched on my desk. My massive Wacom Cintiq drawing tablet, worth $3,000, and incredibly easy to carry, was still plugged in. I pushed past him, my heart hammering a violent rhythm against my ribs, and sprinted up the stairs to the master bedroom. The doors to my mahogany armoire had been violently ripped open, the wood splintered around the lock. The velvet box was gone. Nothing else was touched. My designer watches, my emergency cash envelope in the nightstand, my laptop, all of it remained completely undisturbed. The burglar had bypassed $20,000 of easily fensible electronics to steal one specific velvet box. I stood in the center of the bedroom, staring at the splintered wood, as the sick, twisted brilliance of his plan finally washed over me. He knew I would eventually look closely at the necklace. He knew my eyes were too sharp to be fooled by his resin replica forever. So, he staged a violent, chaotic break-in to steal the fake necklace. He needed the fake to disappear so I would never realize the real one was already long gone. "Oh my God," I whispered, forcing my voice to crack, covering my mouth with both hands as Derek jogged into the bedroom behind me. I turned to him, tears of pure, unadulterated fury welling in my eyes, which he entirely mistook for grief. "My grandmother's necklace. Derek, it's gone. I'm so sorry, baby," he cooed, wrapping his arms around me, pressing his face into my hair. "I'm so sorry. The police will find them. We'll file an insurance claim right now. I'll make this right." The sheer sensation of his arms around me made my skin physically crawl. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to tear the skin from his face, but I buried my face in his chest and nodded, playing the part of the hysterical, heartbroken wife. 2 hours later, a bored-looking detective stood in my living room, taking notes while Derek passionately described how the neighborhood was going downhill. I watched the detective look at the glass on the floor. I looked at the glass on the floor. The shards were mostly outside on the patio concrete. If someone smashes a window to get inside, the force of the impact sends the glass spraying across the living room rug. If someone inside the house smashes the window to make it look like a break-in, the glass falls outward. Derek was an arrogant, desperate day trader, not a forensic expert. That's when the real bombshell dropped. As the detective handed Derek his business card and walked out the front door, my eyes drifted up to the ceiling corners of my living room, specifically, to the small, sleek black boxes mounted on swivel brackets, aimed directly at the center of the room. Derek thought I just had a basic ADT home alarm system. He completely forgot about my work equipment. Because I frequently animate complex character movements while working remotely, my entire living room and home studio are hardwired with a professional, low-light motion capture system. It consists of 8 specialized infrared cameras designed to track physical movement in 3-dimensional space. To save massive amounts of hard drive storage, the system doesn't record traditional, heavy MP4 video files. Instead, it runs constantly on a rolling 48-hour buffer, using infrared sensors to record movement as pure data. It tracks skeletal articulation, capturing the exact spatial coordinates of anything moving in the room. Derek had smashed the window at 2 p.m. while I was at the office. He thought he was entirely alone. I waited until midnight. I waited until the rhythmic, heavy snoring from the guest bedroom confirmed Derek was entirely unconscious. I slipped out from beneath the cold sheets, crept down the hallway, and locked myself inside my studio. I booted up my massive rendering server. The hum of the liquid cooling fan sounded like a jet engine in the dead silence of the house. I opened Autodesk Motion Builder, my primary animation software, and pulled the raw FBX data logs from the motion capture server directory, specifically isolating the timeline between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. that afternoon. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, importing the raw data into a blank 3D 3D environment. I link the positional data points to a basic, glowing green digital skeleton to visualize the movement. I dragged the timeline scrubber to exactly 2:14 p.m. The glowing green digital skeleton materialized in the center of the virtual living room. I sat completely frozen in my ergonomic chair, the harsh blue light of the monitor illuminating my face, watching the undeniable truth play out in high-definition digital space. The skeleton walked from the kitchen area toward the window. But it wasn't just a generic walk cycle. Motion capture is inherently biometric. It captures the unique, irreplaceable physical signatures of human movement. I watched the skeleton favor its left leg slightly. I watched its shoulders slouch with a very specific, asymmetrical posture. It was the exact, unmistakable gait of a man who tore his ACL playing college football a decade ago and never fully recovered. It was Derek. I watched his digital ghost pick up a heavy, cylindrical object, the data points mapping the shape of my heavy steel fireplace poker. I watched the skeleton raise its arms, brace its feet, and violently swing the poker outward, smashing the glass from the inside of the house. I watched him drop the poker, turn around, jog up the stairs, and return 3 minutes later carrying the shape of the velvet box. I watched him walk to the kitchen sink and literally throw the box down the garbage disposal. He didn't just steal from me, he destroyed the box my grandmother gave me just to hide his tracks. The rage that crystallized in my veins wasn't hot and chaotic. It was absolute, freezing absolute zero. I didn't stop there. The next morning, Wednesday, Derek left the house at 8 a.m., claiming he had an emergency meeting with his investment group. I knew exactly what that meant. I immediately walked into the guest room, picked up his secondary iPad that he left charging on the nightstand, and guessed his passcode on the first try. It was the date of our wedding. The irony made me violently nauseous. I opened his email. I searched the word pawn. There it was. An electronic receipt from a place called Gold Standard Estate Buyers located directly downtown. I opened the PDF attachment. It was a formal pawn contract. Derek hadn't just sold my grandmother's necklace for quick cash. He had pawned the $15,000 heirloom for a desperate, pathetic loan of exactly $3,000. But the contract was structured with a buyback option. He had 30 days to repay the $3,000 plus an astronomical 20% interest rate to reclaim the necklace before the shop put it on the public market. And how had he secured this buyback option? He had linked the automated repayment terms directly to my personal emergency savings account. His plan was so sickeningly clear. He pawned the real necklace to get $3,000 in liquid cash immediately. He was going to dump that money into some volatile crypto meme coin, hoping to win big. When he made his profit, he would let the pawn shop drain my savings account to buy the necklace back, bring it home, and pretend he discovered it dumped in a bush down the street by the fictional burglars, making himself the hero of the story. I printed the contract. I exported the mocap data onto a heavy, encrypted USB drive. I packed the broken resin replica, which I had secretly fished out of the garbage disposal, into my purse. Today, Wednesday, March 18, 2026, the sky over the city was a bruised, heavy gray, threatening a torrential downpour that perfectly matched my mood. I parked my car 2 blocks away from the neon signs of Gold Standard Estate Buyers and walked through the heavy, reinforced security doors. The pawn shop smelled of old dust, industrial glass cleaner, and raw desperation. The walls were lined with ticking vintage clocks and rows of neglected guitars. I walked straight past the electronics counter and headed directly for the reinforced glass display cases near the back, the area labeled Premium Estate. My chest tightened so painfully I had to gasp for air. Sitting there, draped elegantly over a black velvet bust, under the harsh glare of halogen security lights, was my grandmother's necklace. The diamonds were catching the light, throwing violent, beautiful prisms of fire in every direction. The IOR was perfect. Beautiful piece, ain't it? I looked up. A heavy-set man with a thick beard and a jeweler's loop resting on his forehead was leaning against the glass counter. It is, I replied, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of all emotion. It's a vintage platinum setting with a 2-carat center stone. There is a custom engraving on the back of the clasp that reads, "For L, my guiding light. And it belongs to me." The pawnbroker's smile vanished instantly. He crossed his arms over his chest, his posture shifting into immediate, practiced defense. "Look, lady, I buy estate pieces fair and square. We run everything through the police database. This wasn't flagged as stolen when it came in last week. If you have a dispute, take it up with the guy who signed the paperwork." I didn't blink. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I had saved 2 days ago. I put it on speakerphone and placed it on the glass counter directly above my stolen diamonds. Detective Vance, Financial Crimes Division, the gruff voice answered through the speaker. Detective Vance, this is Lilly Harper. We met yesterday regarding the burglary at my home, I stated, staring dead into the pawnbroker's widening eyes. I am currently standing inside Gold Standard Estate Buyers on 4th Street. I am looking at my stolen $15,000 heirloom necklace. The owner here is about to provide me with the original pawn contract, complete with the seller's state-issued ID and thumbprint. I looked at the pawnbroker. Right? The man swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. I'll go get the file, he muttered, turning quickly toward the back office. The pawn ticket confirmed everything. Derek's driver's license photocopy, his messy, hurried signature, the exact timestamp of the transaction, and, right at the bottom right corner, pressed deep into the paper in stark black ink, was his physical thumbprint. I walked out of that pawn shop with the necklace safely secured in a police evidence bag, completely ignoring the rain soaking through my coat. I had the detective, I had the paper trail, and I had the digital ghost. Which brings me back to this exact moment. I sit in the dark of my studio. The projector hums loudly, casting the glowing green skeleton of my husband smashing our window against the wall in a continuous, damning loop. The front door shuts. Heavy footsteps echo down the hardwood hallway. Lily, baby, I'm home, Derek calls out. He sounds exhausted, probably because his meme coin plummeted another 40% while he was pretending to be at an office. He turns the corner and steps into the open doorway of the studio. He reaches out and flicks the light switch, but I had already cut the breaker to the overhead lights. The only illumination in the room is the projector, throwing the massive, moving green skeleton directly across his chest. He freezes. The fake, supportive husband's smile completely melts off his face, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated psychological terror. His eyes dart from me, sitting rigidly in the shadows, to the wall, where his digital avatar is currently raising a virtual fireplace poker. He recognizes the limp. He recognizes the movement. He knows exactly what he is looking at. Lily, what is this? He stammers, his voice cracking violently, taking a slow step backward toward the hallway. What are you watching? I slowly stand up from my chair. I walk over to my desk and pick up the crushed, mangled piece of 3D printed resin I had pulled from the garbage disposal. I toss it through the air. It lands heavily at his feet, skidding across the hardwood. Your topology is a little messy, Derek, I whispered, the words slicing through the heavy silence of the room like a scalpel. The layer lines on the resin were a dead giveaway. You really should have sanded it down before applying the chrome finish. His jaw literally drops open. He looks down at the broken plastic, then back up to the wall, watching himself systematically fake a crime scene. I don't know what you're talking about. This is crazy. You're crazy. A real diamond has an index of refraction of 2.42. Derek, I continued, taking a step toward him, backing him out into the hallway. It bends light. It doesn't absorb it. You stole my grandmother's necklace to fund a gambling addiction. You faked a home invasion to cover it up, and you linked the pawnshop buyback to my emergency savings. Lily, wait, please, I can explain. He practically screams, his hands flying up defensively as genuine panic finally shatters his arrogant facade. I was going to put it back. I just needed liquidity for a margin call. I was going to buy it back today. I swear to God. You can't buy it back today, I replied, my voice completely dead, because it's currently sitting in an evidence locker at the 14th precinct. Right on cue, the heavy, blinding glare of a police spotlight tore through the shattered window in the living room, illuminating the entire first floor in a harsh, unforgiving white light. The heavy pounding of a tactical flashlight hit the front door. Police, open the door. Derek spun around, letting out a pathetic, guttural whimper. He looked back at me, tears streaming down his face, completely entirely broken. Lily, please, don't do this. I'm your husband. You're a wireframe, I spat, walking past him to unlock the deadbolt. Just bad data. The fallout was absolute and immediate. Derek was arrested on the spot, dragged out of our home in handcuffs in full view of the entire neighborhood. The charges were staggering: grand larceny for the $15,000 necklace, filing a false police report for the staged break-in, and felony insurance fraud, because the absolute idiot had already successfully filed a renter's insurance claim for the stolen jewelry the day before. While he was sitting in a concrete holding cell, the detectives secured a warrant for his electronics. The financial autopsy they performed was horrific. Derek hadn't just lost a little bit of money in a temporary dip. He had systematically liquidated over $60,000 in a series of disastrous, highly leveraged pump and dump crypto schemes. By pawning my necklace and bringing the police into our lives, he had inadvertently handed the authorities the exact financial paper trail they needed to uncover a secondary charge of wire fraud tied to his investment group. I reclaimed my grandmother's necklace from the precinct 3 days later. It currently sits exactly where it belongs, heavy and radiant, perfectly refracting the morning light. I filed for divorce the morning after his arrest. My lawyers were thrilled when I handed over the evidence. I am currently spending my evenings utilizing my professional animation skills to render a highly polished, 4K resolution documentary short of his entire crime, complete with time-stamped mocap data, pawn shop receipts, and bank logs. I plan to play it on a massive screen in the center of the divorce court. Derek thought he could outsmart a woman who builds alternate realities for a living. Now, he's learning that attempting to day trade commissary noodles in a federal jail cell is significantly more difficult than projecting fake wealth. Am I the monster here, or did he get exactly what he deserved?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.